Hey guys, happy Tuesday. How are you doing? Today we're going to cover the most important endgame you must know. Only that. So, yeah, I'm gonna wait maybe a minute or two for people to join. I don't want to start too soon because I know people end up joining and asking the same questions over and over, and I keep repeating myself, going back to chapter one. So, yeah, I know at least a couple of viewers who may be interested in this one. So we're gonna wait for a minute. Hope you're doing great, guys. This is a very important endgame, very important, and I have a bit less than 2 hours to go over it. So we'll try our best. Um, yeah. In the meantime, what's going on in the chess world? I'm not sure. Probably the AIM Chess Rapid is going on, right? Also the US Chess Championships. So, yeah, lots of good stuff. Oh, yeah, the games are barely starting here. I mean, not barely, but probably still on their first hour of play. Um, and how are we doing here? This is no longer the preliminaries, right? They're already in the knockout section. Why did I hear a sound? Um, oh, so whenever they make a move in one of these boards, I hear the move sound. I didn't know that. Okay, so apparently we're in the quarterfinals. Um, they are in the quarterfinals today, and that means, if I'm correct, that we have Duda Vidit, Carlsen, Erigaisi, Mamedyarov, Satorov, and Rapport Gukesh. And those are all the players that are left. If I'm not mistaken, 8 players should be left. And yeah, they're playing these games over here, except Duda Vidit, they're already on game 3. I think I'm reading this correctly. Or not. Maybe they already finished game 3 and it was a draw. That can't be a draw. I guess someone lost. Yeah. Um, all right. So, Carlsen Erigaisi, let's see. Draw in the first game. Carlsen won the second game. So in this third game, I'm not sure if maybe Arjun needs to win. It feels like Black has this under control. All right. Anyone there, guys? I'm ready to start. I'm ready to start. Okay, I'm gonna start this session, and yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the chat as usual. I hope people will join on the go. And I'm going to be following this study that I already created a long time ago. It's called Techniques in Rook and Pawn versus Rook. Now, this is a very, 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 very important endgame. rook and pawn versus rook, uh, for, for a number of reasons. I like to say that this is the most important endgame you must know, and then when I can, I add after king and pawn versus king, because obviously they're simpler endgames than this one. But this one kind of makes you, I don't want to, okay, it's a bit bold to put it like this, but it makes you a good player. Like, there's a certain level where you really can't move on if you don't know this, because many endgames end up in this. King and pawn endgames are arguably the most important, obviously, and pawns very frequently make it to the endgame because we have a lot of them. So yeah, usually pawns are important in the endgame for two reasons. First of all, many of them make it to the endgame because we have many, and the second is obviously promotion, so their value is actually very high in the endgame. So yeah, king and pawn endgames are the most basic, and there are many things to cover there. We're gonna go over them in other sessions. But then rooks. Uh, Rooks make it to the endgame also with certain, relatively high frequency, and the reason is, when we start the game, we develop our pieces. Well, we open the central pawns because it's important to grab the center. That allows us to develop the bishops, and the knights obviously can be developed at any point because they're knights, they jump over pawns. So 9 times out of 10, when I say that, I mean probably 95 times out of 100, um, your minor pieces get into play before your rooks do. And I don't want to, I mean, maybe we can argue it's 99 out of 100. Yeah, your minor pieces go first. So rooks are like the last pieces that enter the game. First of all, because you don't need to move them to develop. It's like the last piece you want to develop. They're starting a corner. They're not easy to develop. When you start, there are other priorities. And then also, their value also increases in the end game when they start to be, smoke clears and there are open files to use, especially if there are many open files to use, then the value of the rooks increases a lot. Um, so, so rook and pawn endgames are very frequent and therefore very important to study. Another thing to mention is, well, that sometimes you trade all the rooks, like, a file gets opened and the 4 rooks get traded. So not always you're gonna have a rook and pawn endgame, but many times you will. And also the players decide, like, you can avoid the rook trades. It's usually an agreement between both players when a file gets open and all the rooks get traded off. That's usually because both players agree. But yeah, sometimes, well, if you don't study as any other endgame, if you don't study this one, maybe you feel like trading all the rooks because you don't understand rook and pawn endgames. But as soon as you start studying them and seeing the advantages of knowing certain things, then you may be more comfortable going into them. Anyway, the other important point about rook and pawn endgames is they're very complicated. They're incredibly complicated. So those are the two reasons to study them. They're frequent and they're complicated. So yeah, good reason to study. And there are obviously many complicated cases that we're not going to go over, but the simplest, I think, the simplest case, the simplest endgame that's not so simple that you must study is the one we're going to cover today. It's rook and pawn versus rook. We're not going to see rook versus rook because king and rook versus king and rook, what to say about that? Some people don't have respect for their opponents and they play on in such a position. But obviously king and rook versus king and rook is a draw. And yeah, so the most So the simplest we should cover is rook and pawn versus rook and pawn, which is what we're gonna see today. I have this study, I'm gonna go over it. Maybe I make some updates to it. It's a study that I created a long time ago when emotes were still allowed on leeches, so it has some emojis. So yeah, good stuff. So I'm not gonna edit any of these texts because then the emojis will be lost forever and ever. So, but I'm gonna go over them and read them out loud. These endgames are a battle of ideas where both sides can use different techniques. Maybe I should edit this, but okay, it's no lie. It is true. Um, and yeah, that's one of the points of this study. This study is called techniques. Techniques in Rook and Pawn versus Rook. Why? Because this is a complicated endgame. You know, it looks simple, like the material balance is very simple. It's a rook and a pawn for one side, a rook for the other side. But there's so many cases already. It's so tricky, it's so complicated that I found that the best way to go over it and explain the concepts is to show the different techniques that both sides have. That is, the attacking side, what techniques does this side have to convert an advantage when, if, and then when there's an advantage, and the techniques that the defending side has to make a draw. And understanding all these different techniques, I think, is more important than memorizing, different each case, because there's so many. And also, in my experience, well, not in my experience, in chess, what happens is when you have a rook and pawn versus rook endgame, all these techniques are in play. Like you use one technique to prevent the other side from using certain technique, and so on. And depending on what your opponent does, you may need to use one technique or another. So it's important to, I think, know the concepts, know the different techniques, and then in your games try to think, because let's not forget, chess is a game where you have to think. But if you have the tools, at least you will be able to manage. But yeah, people get very confused, I think. In my experience, now I can say that in my experience, people get too confused when they're trying to think of rook and pawn endgames as like some other types of endgames where oh, this position is that, I should do this and it's a draw. um, this is not so simple. Again, many techniques are in play, and it depends on what your opponent does. So many people get confused because, oh yeah, I remember this position, this was third rank defense. Well, that's maybe an easy one. This was this technique, I have to do this and it's going to be a draw. But then something, you play around and you actually need to use a different technique, and then you lose because you try to oversimplify the position. um, I don't know if I'm making this more complicated than it is, and maybe I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. But truth is, most of the times, unless it's an immediate draw, and immediate is, I don't know, you lose the pawn, for example. Unless it's an immediate draw, your opponent can play around and try to trick you. So you have to be ready to use different techniques. You can't just think, oh, with just this one technique, I'm gonna make a draw and that's it. So people get confused many times. They think in terms of, I remember this position, this is the solution, and no, it's a complete toolkit of techniques you need, and you need to see how to use. Anyway, let's not make it more complicated. Let's go case by case. But again, let's remember these are techniques, and they're gonna mix. And let me read this. The goal of this study is to offer clear explanations, let's hope it is the case, of each individual technique. But bear in mind that in your end games, many techniques will appear and mix. I hope you learn a lot. Okay, and this position we have in front of us is like the most complicated we're going to see today. But let's first start over the most simple cases. So yeah, I organized this study in two sets of chapters. First, I'm gonna go over defensive techniques, and then I'm gonna go over attacking techniques, and then we're gonna have some examples of Pong on sixth rank, and all the techniques are gonna mix there. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure this is the best um, way to teach it. Actually, with my students, we're usually combining defensive and attacking techniques, but at least it makes the study very clear and very organized. So I'm going to try to follow it like this. First, we're going to see defensive techniques, then we're going to see attacking techniques. So that's it. We're going to see first rank defense, we're going to see third rank defense, we're going to see long side defense, and Kling and Horwitz defense, which are basic, very basic defensive techniques that I think any club level player must know, especially the first three. Some people don't know Kling and Horwitz, but I think it's also important. Um, yeah, and this is a very brief summary. First rank defense, use it against a knight's pawn. We're gonna go over these things, but okay. Third rank defense, Philidor, use it whenever you can. That's a good advice. Long side defense, use it to prevent Lucena. Lucena, we're gonna see it's an attacking technique. And Kling and Horwitz, use it when you can't use anything else. That's an interesting tip. Yeah, I mean, maybe use it when you can too, but yeah, if you can do Philidor, we're gonna go over this. If you can do Philidor, it's gonna be much easier. Or if you can do first rank defense, it's gonna be much easier than doing Kling and Horwitz. So yeah, good advice, I guess, in this order. All right. Um, so the first defensive technique, and most players know this one because it's I think the simplest. To me, the simplest is first rank, but okay. This is the one that's probably most well known. It's the third rank defense, and it is the easiest defensive technique, and a practical idea for the for the defending side would be to do it whenever we can. Other techniques would work in this position, but again, this is the easiest one. So why wouldn't we do the easiest one? Hello, Cagni. Welcome. Welcome, pod friend. You're just in time. Um, for our first defensive technique, Philidor. Uh, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? Philidor, as you know, has a number of things in chess named after him. And one of them is this, the third rank defense in Rook and Pawn versus Rook. Nice. That's good. So yeah, in this position, it's black to move. I wonder why. Maybe we should put it from the black side. I'm gonna edit the chapter for that. I think it makes sense if we're defending to put it from the defending side. So yeah, it's black to play and move, and again, other techniques help here, but before we, well, you already see the move on the screen. It's Rook G6, but before we explain why it works, let's name the important features of this position. Why can we do this? First of all, our king, the defending, we're the defensive side. We're the defending side. We're down a pawn. Our opponent is the one with the pawn. So very importantly, we have the king in front of the pawn. It's actually on the promotion square. King in front of the pawn is ideal. If we had the king like on the other side of the board, then we would have a hard time to stop that one, to stop that pawn. And obviously in this endgame, it's all about the pawn. If the pawn disappears, it's an immediate draw. If the pawn gets to promote, we're lost. So we need to prevent the pawn from promoting, but also we need to prevent being checkmated, which sometimes happens because, you know, the pawn, the rook, the king, it's too much. So yeah, we want ideally our king in front of the pawn, because even though we have more chances to get checkmated like that, at least we have also more chances to just stop any promotion ideas. So in this position, and this is something you can do whenever the third rank is empty, like it is now, that is, neither the king or the pawn reached that rank yet, then we can do the very simple rook g6, which is the so-called defense on the third rank, or Philidor. Hey, 3 at a time, welcome. Did you know my chess style is a perfect replica of Stockfish level 1, who people can't summon the free will to bang? Right, hey, okay. How are you? How are you doing? And how well do you know these rook and pawn versus rook techniques? I think my chess style particularly doesn't resemble Stockfish, not even level 1. Sloth John, hello, welcome. All right, so people joining just in time. Hello, everybody. So yeah, we're seeing the defensive techniques. Well, we're going over this study, which is a public study that I have since a long time ago. Techniques um, on techniques in Rook and Pawn versus Rook, the most important endgame that you must know after King and Pawn. Miron Wax, hello. So third rank defense. Let's go over it again, and I'm gonna start moving on. I promise. If the third rank is free, empty, that is, neither the king or the pawn arrived there yet, and we have our king in front of the pawn, so it's ready to help, then we simply cover the third rank. The simplest defense ever. We just cover the third rank. And done. Done. That's done. That's it. My techniques are terrible, but my intuition guides me through sucking luckily. I need to exercise this stuff for me even when I feel I know it luckily for me. Okay. Okay. So you defend this third rank, and then you stay there forever. There's no way this pawn is going to promote without being pushed at some point. Okay. And there's no way your opponent is going to checkmate you, because the rook alone will not checkmate you without the help of the king and or the pawn. So what we're doing here, let's say if white just moves the rook anywhere, we just keep moving the rook on the third rank. So that's not a problem. We just cut the third rank, and we have squares to keep the rook on the third rank until white finally pushes the pawn. What we're doing with a rook cutting the third rank is making sure, this is the important concept, we're making sure that for white to make progress, they need to push the pawn. There's no way the king can go in front now, because we're cutting the third rank with the rook. So the king can't push. The only way that white can try to make progress is eventually pushing the pawn. But then, once white pushes the pawn, and this is important, now we stop wasting our time, because if we don't do anything, white will just push the king and checkmate us or promote. So now it's very important. Whenever the pawn gets pushed, then we go all the way back. Which we didn't include this as a basic technique, but I mean, checks from behind, that's that's more or less a common defensive idea. Now the checks will come, and because the pawn has been pushed, there's no way this king will hide from the checks. If the king was still on e5, the king could try to hide in front of the pawn. But this is the thing. We waited until the pawn was pushed. Now we come back from the for the checks, and there's no way white can win, because there's no way for white to make progress, because we're going to start checking that king forever and ever, and it's never going to find shelter. Let's Kain Jing, hello, welcome. So now, for example, if king d6, which, by the way, threatens checkmate, we can check, 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 and so on. We keep checking forever until that king goes away from the pawn. We can anyway stay with the rook on the back rank, just ready to check if if the king gets anywhere near our king. So there's no way for white to make progress. But it was very important, again, to cut on the third rank to prevent the king from going in front of the pawn. That's why this is deceptively harder than it looks. Infinite checks makes things weird. Well, it's yeah, in order to win, you need to avoid your opponent to keep checking you forever. All right, so that was the so-called third rank defense, or Philidor defense. That's the one that people knows. Usually, it's very easy to remember. Um, it has a name, Philidor, so people remember this one. Now, this is an example that I don't think it's very relevant, but okay, it's in the study, so let's go over it. It's that you can do Philidor in a different rank, on a different rank. So let's put it from the back side as well. And yeah, you could do this. Now we're on the fourth rank instead of the third rank, and you could do Philidor there. Now you need to be careful with that, because, for example, if they perform this check, you may want to go up if you really want to do Philidor on that rank, because if you go down, then there's space in front of the pawn, and the whole idea of Philidor was to remove the space in front of the pawn. But yeah, and once the pawn gets pushed, you go from behind. So yeah, Philidor can be done in different ranks. In my opinion, if I started in a position like this, I would wait. Personally, I would just put the rook behind and wait, and maybe when needed, I would do Philidor on the third rank, because the third rank is pretty clear right now. So there's gonna be time to do Philidor. But okay, if you feel like it, you can do it on the fourth rank, and also on the fifth if necessary. Well, not if necessary, if you want. Okay, that's side chapter. I may even consider removing that chapter because it's not super relevant as, a defensive technique. Now, the second most relevant defensive technique, and the other, I think this is the other technique that people know the most, is the so-called long side defense. Long side defense. Long side means that, for each pawn that you consider, there's always going to be a long side and a short side, because the chessboard doesn't have a central file. So a pawn is either on the king side or the queen side. This pawn, for example, is on the king side. Pretty central, but it's still on the king side. That means that this side to its left is the so-called long side. Actually, I'm going to put it in green. And this side on the other, on the right, is the short side. So we have four files to the left, 3 files to the right. So there's a long side and a short side. Now, very important, very, very, very important. We're gonna see this in examples. Whenever in doubt, you go to the short side with your king, because you want the long side for your rook. See how this king, the defending king, is on the short side, and the defending rook is on the long side. Perfect. That's perfect defense. You want to have it like that. Actually, because we're seeing this also from a defensive perspective, let me flip the board again. I don't want to mess with your brains, but let me flip the board. Okay. So, king on g7, it's on the short side. Rook on the a file, it's on the long side. this is perfect setup. I mean, it's not perfect because perfect would be as we saw, king in front of the pawn and rook on the third rank cutting. Obviously, Philidor is much easier than this, but this is desperate, and yet we can make a draw because we have the perfect setup. Why do I say this is desperate? Because this king is nowhere near from stopping the pawn. I mean, it's near, but it's cut. So it's never coming to try and stop the pawn, right? So its only purpose right now is to prevent this king from going to this, to this side. But that's the only mission of this king right now. The king is not ideal, really. It would be ideal near the pawn, preventing promotion, but it's not. But we have it on the short side. That's good. The other reason why this is desperate, apart from our king being cut out of the reach of the pawn, is that this pawn is already on the 7th rank, very, very, like one move away from promoting, and the king is in front of it. The attacking king is in front of it. This is like almost a dream scenario for white, except for one thing. We have the rook on the long side. Now white would be winning. White would be winning if we had the rook on the short side. And the king, for example, here. White would be winning. But we have the perfect setup, so remember this is very important. Rook on the long side, king on the short side. And now it's black to move and draw. And well, this is not a very complicated technique. I think what's more complicated is to achieve this position. Because people see this, and now we're gonna see the technique, which is like incredibly stupid. It's okay, we're gonna start checking from the long side, and then people are like, oh yeah, long side defense. You give checks from the long side. Super easy to remember. But then they're in a position, I don't know, like 5-6 moves before this happens, and they have to make a decision. Do we go with the king to the long side or to the short side? And they go to the long side, and I'm like, no. So these concepts are important, but you still need to think, and it's important to understand the concepts so you can then use them. So if we want the king on the short side and the rook on the long side, remember it. Remember it. So when you're in a position where you have to choose, you can choose the right one. Now, once you already get here, the defense is very simple. We start checking from the long side. Now the king has to move. We keep checking. So we keep checking from the side. And it's another situation of, keep checking, so the opponent doesn't have time to promote. Even though the pawn is one square away from promoting, even though our king can't stop the promotion, we can keep checking forever. Okay, maybe not forever, but at least until the king gets far enough from the pawn. So now, for example, king d8, the king needs to defend the pawn. Rook a8 check, king c7, and now rook a7 check. And yeah, the king needs to go back to defend the pawn. Notice that only because we had four files, this check works. If we had just one less file, we wouldn't be able to do this check. So that's the reason why we need the long side. With in the short side, this would not be possible. Let me read this. This defensive technique teaches us one important rule in order to avoid the Lucena position, which we will see when we go over attacking ideas. The only reliable resource is the long side. And we can draw another important conclusion, which I repeated already a couple times. In most cases, the defensive king should go to the short side so that the rook can go to the long one. And when I say in most cases, I want to say 100% of the cases. Believe me, trust me on this one. 100% of the cases you want to go to the short side, because going to the short side always works. Going to the long side sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So just go to the short side with the king always. Just be safe. All right. Um, Now, if the king goes to the 6th rank, well, we can keep checking. It's not the only move, but we can keep checking. And yeah, we can keep checking on these 3 squares until the king goes too far. For example, king c5, then we can go after the pawn. That's it. But yeah, basically checks from the side. Super easy, right? So we saw already the 2 most important defensive techniques, Philidor, also called 3rd rank defense, and um, long side defense, which is this one. These 2, I think, are the ones that people know the most. So now we're going to dive into um, 1st rank defense, which to me is the simplest, although for some reason most people don't know it, and Kling and Horwitz, which most people don't know for some reason. Hey, Sponge Like Cannon, welcome. Oh, glad you arrived too. So now that you're here, already super helpful, nice. So we saw so far Philidor, 3rd rank defense, or sorry, um, the long side defense. Now, let me know if you don't know these 2, and we can do a brief summary of them. But also, we're following this study that's public, so I'm gonna put it there for reference. Um, I'm going over it, simply trying to explain the ideas myself. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next technique, defensive technique, which is hopefully the 1st rank defense. Yep. And again, I'm going to put it from the perspective of the defending side. So I'm going to edit this. All right. Okay, in this position, it's white to move. Hello, John John. Welcome. So it's white to move, and white plays king a6 very, very logically. And white is threatening. Well, at least the position seems very dangerous for us. What a blunder! Now king a6 is a good move, arguably the best move. We would do, by the way, the same defense against king b6. It's the same really. Yeah, king b6 would threaten checkmate, and king a6 threatens just to get our king out, and then play b6 with a check, and trying to promote. Both ideas seem strong, and the point of king a6 is to answer rook a8 check, rook a1 check with king b6, and then we're busted. So I think king a6 is a good move, and we may feel that we're in danger, and to an extent we're in danger. In fact, if this was not a knight's pawn or a rook's pawn, I mean, if this was a bishop's pawn or a central pawn, we would be lost. We would be, except for one thing, except for Kling and Horwitz. But okay, we're gonna see that. Yeah. So I can't say that. I can't say we would be lost because we wouldn't. But we didn't see that technique yet. Anyway, uh, one of the points of this position is we can't use any of the techniques we already saw, right? We can't do 3rd rank defense because we can't enter the 3rd rank. Well, for a number of reasons. First, we can't enter the 3rd rank. Second, even if we could, such a move would be horrible because the king is already in the 3rd rank. So our opponent would just block with the pawn, and yeah, not a good move. Except because we still have the 1st rank defense, but we didn't see that yet. So we can't do 3rd rank defense. The other thing we can't do is long side defense, because going to the long side here doesn't help. This king is on the other side. Again, lateral checks won't work here. So what do we do? Well, thankfully we're in, again, this is a nice pawn, and in my opinion, against a knight pawn, we resign. We don't resign. This is a draw. In my opinion, uh, the defense against a knight's pawn is the easiest defense ever. And you know, when you play endgames and you see some player knows something that the other player doesn't, it's so funny to watch. We resign advice I can remember. It's so funny to watch when one player trades the wrong pawn and then you have a piece up, let's say bishop ending, but your rook pawn promotes on the wrong square, on the wrong color square. So you know it's going to be a draw. You know the defending side is went for that, and the other side is not aware of that, and then a draw happens, and it's so fun to watch when I don't know if you've seen this kind of thing that I'm saying, when you see one player knows something that the other doesn't, and then one of the sides makes a horrible, terrible decision. Um, so what I'm saying is, whenever my opponent has a remaining knight pawn, it doesn't matter the position. If it's king and rook versus king, rook, and pawn, and the pawn is a knight pawn, I'm super safe. I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to draw this. It's like simplest technique. First rank defense, the simplest technique. You don't need the complexities of Kling and Horwitz. You don't need the complexities of third rank defense, which is not so complicated. But so, what's the defense? Well, first of all, you need the king to be in front of the pawn, like we have here. That's important. If the king was here, well, bad luck. We will be lost. Uh, so the point is, the king in front of the pawn and rook to the first rank. How hard is that to remember? I guess it's not so hard to remember. Also because it's called first rank defense. So we bring the rook to the first rank, so we're not gonna get checkmated. And okay, our opponent makes progress. Let's say b6, and now the plan, and this is very easy to remember, is we do nothing. we, we just keep the rook on the first rank. So basically, any move, rook d8, rook e8, rook f8, rook g8, draws. Any of those moves draw. Now, if the rook was somewhere else, not on c8, another move we could consider is king a8. Right now, there's a bit of a fork, so let's not go there. But in general, as long as you have the king on b8, a8, and the rook on the first rank, there's no way for white to make progress. So yeah, let's play rook f8. And yeah, if white does nothing, we do nothing. And by nothing, I mean we keep the rook on the first rank, or we move the king to a8, back to b8. In general, I move the rook. I just don't move the king until my opponent forces me. Hello, Kyle Lauren. So yeah, if rook b7 check, for example, now this is very important. We go to the corner, so we stay in front of the pawn or the corner, which, by the way, is the short side. So you should remember that also from the previous advice. Always, 100% of the times, go to the short side. But yeah, this particular case also go to the corner, because if you go to c8, then white wins with king a7, securing the promotion of the pawn. Just king a8. Just king a8, and now, for example, check, king b8, and yeah, really no way to make progress for white. So yeah, and we just stay. It's very simple, right? Now, if white ever pushes the pawn, uh, pretty much every move still works, except getting checkmated. I mean, if you do this, you get checkmated, but you would never do that. So you can keep doing the same technique, just stay on the first rank, because there's absolutely no way to make progress for white. Or if it was me, I would just check, and the king has to go to one of these squares. If it goes to this square, you can also play this and grab the pawn on the next move. This is the easiest way to just finish the game. If they take your rook, it's a stalemate. And if they go here, well, you can choose a number of moves here, but once the king is out, there's no way for white to ever promote the pawn. So you can just wait, or you can go back to repeat position, or you can go with the king here. Like everything is a draw here. So in general, you don't need to study anything other than, you know, um, let's delete this because, yeah, in general, the only thing you need to know for first rank defense is if you get to have the king in front of the pawn and it's a knight's pawn, just bring the rook to the first rank. It's a draw. You, like the fortress is very easy to keep. Just keep the rook on the first rank. It's not so complicated. Okay, so this is one of the simplest defensive techniques we have, and I guess oh yeah, this is just an example of how first rank defense doesn't work against a bishop's pawn. Again, it only works against a knight's pawn. And you don't need it against a rook's pawn. But that's a different story because rook's pawns are horrible. But yeah, against a bishop's pawn or a central pawn, you would lose if you do first rank defense. So this position, it's black to move. And if it was you guys, it is black to move. And I know we're seeing it from white's perspective. Okay, the pawn promotes where black's king is. But it's black to move. Which move would you play as black? This is a tricky question because I say so. But yeah, if you were black in this position, how would you try to save the game? If anyone can answer that question, because maybe you all know, and maybe what we're explaining is not useful. Rook d7 loses on the spot, Junjun. Okay, so rook d7. By the way, you very, very, very rarely want to trade rooks in this endgame as black, because most of them are just losing. I mean, it has to be incredibly clear. I can lose faster than rook d7, king b8. Right. Yeah. Well done, guys. Okay, so king b8 loses because you get mated in 2 moves. Okay, that's correct. Correct to lose. And rook d7, just rook takes rook. It's not the only winning move. So, but yeah, offering a rook trade when you need to be incredibly careful that the king and pawn endgame is not lost, which in most cases is. And yeah, against rook, I mean, there are other moves like check and do the trade here also. All right, so no king b8, no rook d7. We ruled out already 2 moves. We don't have many more options. There's one move that draws here, and what's pointed out by the red arrow is that move rook d8 doesn't work, which by the way was the point of this chapter, to show that it doesn't work. Now rook b1 check is a very interesting suggestion, lead, and rook h1 preventing rook h8. Okay, so rook h1 loses very fast. Obviously rook takes rook. Now rook b1 check, the problem is the king goes in front of the pawn. See the king in the front of the pawn, so white is threatening checkmate, and the problem is we don't have a good way to avoid getting kicked out. So our king is going to get kicked out, and white is going to be able to apply Lucena, which is a technique we're going to see. Hello, Chelinuovi. Rook d6 check. Okay, rook d6 check, pawn takes d6 is a problem. So yeah, about rook b1 check king here. Let's see this line because it's a very interesting attempt. Rook b1, it doesn't quite work. Yeah, we're checkmated. We can't really block with the rook. Like playing rook here to block the check is bad because they trade and they promote. So we're forced to move the king to avoid the checkmate. We can go either way, but both ways we're going to lose. Now, if we had to choose, because we already said so, we should choose the short side. It doesn't matter which side we go, we're going to lose on both sides. But in this case, well, I would go to the short side. The thing is, in both cases, we're going to get kicked out, and white is going to be able to promote. In this case, we're on the long side, which is horrible, as we know, and they're going to win applying Lucena. And Engine says it's a draw after king b8. This position after king b8. Not playing rook d7. Well, I can't believe this. I can really. I was in fact going to point out that maybe rook b1 worked. But if it does, you go to the short side, as we're seeing here. But it's incredibly risky. So, yeah, I'm thinking it may draw, but this is the thing. White is going to get that pawn rolling, and you could have prevented that. So we're going to see on the next chapter how to prevent this. Now, if this happens, we already saw how to... what's the best setup? That's very short-sighted. Yeah, but that's the reason why I think we have a draw here. It's because we go to the... Thanks for the follow, Dorfman. We went to the short side, so we have the long side for the rook. Now, if this pawn was a central pawn, like one file to the right, we would not make a draw, because this rook is dominating in this case the h file, but we still have those 3 files in the middle, so we still have a very long side here that's going to allow us to do the long side defense that we explained earlier. So I have to say, rook b1 probably works, okay? But it's risky in the sense that it allows white to make progress. It allows white to first threaten checkmate, force you to the short side, then get your king kicked out, and then push the pawn. And then we will be able to defend using the long side defense that we saw, but we allowed white to make progress. So I guess well done. But as we will see on the next chapter, there's one thing called the Kling and Horwitz defense, which will prevent this pawn from moving, which I prefer if I can avoid. But okay, well, so basically there are 2 moves that draw here then. One is going to be rook b1 check, and the other one is, as we will see on the next chapter, rook c1. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we're completely right about this as the database. And yes, there are 2 drawing moves, rook b1 and rook c1. Okay, just to make 100% sure. Now, we're going to see what happens if rook d8, which was the point of this chapter. We just saw the first rank defense working against a knight's pawn. Now we're gonna see what's the problem with the bishop's pawn. If we try the first rank defense, which is, oh, we just stay with the king in front of the pawn, we just hang out with the rook on the first rank, well, white is gonna win, because when we hang out with the rook, we just wait. They're gonna play this move, rook a7. Ouch. And obviously this file, the a file, is not there when, like, you know, the file, two files to the left of the pawn, it wouldn't be there with knight's pawn. That's the main difference. So now if king b8, we have c7 check. Again, with a knight's pawn, this would not happen. This would not happen. And obviously we're gonna lose this. So yeah, that's why first rank defense doesn't work with a bishop's pawn. Same with a central pawn. It only works with a knight's pawn. That's important to remember. However, if I have a knight's pawn or I'm facing a knight's pawn, I think it's the easiest first rank defense. I wouldn't bother going for something else. And as we're seeing, there's different techniques, and sometimes you see how, like we saw now, that Litz suggested rook b1, and rook b1 was also drawing. So yeah, sometimes you will find that different ideas work. Sometimes you will find that different ideas fail. So if you go with the engine and if you go with the database, sometimes you get confused, because again, it's not as simple as this problem, this solution. Techniques have to mix, and many times, unless you have an immediate draw, like you know, you grab the pawn or something, your opponent can still play around and move you around. So you have to be ready to apply different techniques. So this is why I think it's important to know the different techniques, their names maybe, but more importantly, to know the techniques, and then during your games, well, think and see which ones you can apply. And in general, I would like to go for a second to the first chapter where I have this summary of defensive techniques. In general, I agree with what I wrote here a long time ago. I think it's a good strategy to use the easiest techniques if you can. So what I have here is first rank defense, use it against a knight pawn. If thanks, Liz. If I'm facing a knight's pawn and I can do first rank defense, which is basically bring the rook to the first rank and move it there, I prefer to do that. I prefer to do that, you know, and know that my opponent can't make any kind of progress. I prefer to do that than any of the other techniques that, you know, are trickier. Then if it's not a knight's pawn, or my king is not in front of the pawn or whatever, then the other techniques come into play. So third rank defense, Philidor, I have here, use it whenever you can. And I think that's a good idea. It's also very simple to do. And if you can do it, it's going to be simpler than long side and Kling and Horwitz. Then we have long side defense, use it to prevent Lucena. That is when our king is not in front of the pawn. So so we still have the checks from the long side for that. And now the remaining technique, which we're going to see now, which is arguably the most complicated. It's not that complicated, but it's like the most complicated of these four. Thanks for the follow, Leads. As I have here, use it when you can't use anything else. And I think that's a good advice, because, yeah, again, I would use the simplest ones first. So going back to that position we were seeing, yeah, here. So I'm going to clean the study, and basically I'm going to clean those lines like king b8, rook d7 to keep the study clean. Give me a second. Rook h1, nice one, Jojo. All right. The ice, welcome. Congratulations for that. Okay, so let's move to the next chapter, which is Kling and Horwitz. Two different players, after which this technique is named. All right. In this position is black to defend, so let me flip the board to mess with your brains once again. So we're black here. We're trying to save this position. It is our turn. And what is the simplest defense we can do here in this position? It is not a nice pawn, so first rank will not save the game. However, we have the king in front of the pawn already. That's good. The third rank is free. That's good. We could do Philidor, right? We could do third rank defense. So obviously, the simplest defense here is rook to g6. Rook to g6, and then we do third rank defense, right? I think that's by far the best move. Slightly less illegal than rook b6, which if we could put it on b6, that would also be good. Yeah, rook b6, rook a6, and rook g6. Those are the best moves here. Okay, the problem is they're illegal. Slight problem. But yeah, third rank defense would be so nice. So we can't do that. Rook takes a7 is best. Oh, rook takes... Yeah, rook takes h7 is a good move too. Yeah, correct. Yeah, okay. Now let's focus on the legal moves. We can't do that. In an ideal world, we would like to do that, but rook f6 unfortunately loses the rook, so we can't do third rank defense. So we need to do something else. Waiting will not work because white is so ready to push king and pawn. So for example, if we do rook g5, which I have here, white will push the king. Not in front of the pawn. Why not in front of the pawn? This is a question for you. You're because you're very clever, and you know why would white play king d6 and not king e6? Nothing. No, nothing. You're better at finding illegal moves. Maybe I should ask for more illegal moves. Rook g6 check, yeah. King e6 gives you third rank defense. Exactly, Sponge. Yeah. Cherinovi says rook g1, which hangs mate in 2. Okay, so rook e6. Sorry, king e6. Well, it's a strong move. You know, it threatens mate. Do you know we can see the notation? Yes, I do. DS Sparks. Yeah. Yes. And also the study is public if you want to check it out. Techniques. Yeah, I'm not trying to hide anything, but still, I and even then I don't get good answers. No, yeah, Sponge like Canon gave a very good answer, and PKR gave a good move too. So yeah, white would threaten checkmate by going here, but we would have third rank defense already with rook g6 check. Rook g6, the king has to go out, and then we have third rank defense. Yeah, no problems, these parts. Thank you. Thank you. Nothing to leak here. This is not a test. We're just trying to go over these endgames that we should all know. And yeah, what have you won, Sponge? I don't know. It was just a random question, but you've earned my respect. Um, all right. So yeah, Rook G5 would have been a bad move, but not because of King E6. King E6 gives us the third rank defense, but instead King D6. And again, I said this at the beginning, and I say it here again. When you go over these endgames, all the techniques keep mixing. Like if you do this move, then suddenly third rank defense appears. If white does this move, then suddenly we should go for Kling and Horwitz, or we should go for the other thing. Or so again, it's important to have the tools, the different techniques, and be ready to use them all, uh, even in the same endgame. Because unless you can take that pawn for free, uh, they can play around. They can play around, and you will have to be ready to use different techniques. So yeah, don't think like in other endgames you can say, oh, this endgame, this particular endgame, this is the way to make a fortress. This is the way to win. This is the way to draw. But this one, you need to be ready to be played around a lot. Anyway, King D6. Now we can't do third rank defense because, oops, if we do Rook G6 check, yeah, they're gonna do that. And if we go back to deliver checks from behind, that's good. They can do this check. We have to go out. They can do this check, and suddenly that pawn advances with tempo, and this is not just dangerous. This is lost. So we want to avoid this kind of situation. All right. All right. So let's go back to this position. Rook G5, I mean, just waiting is bad because white is ready to play King D6 as we saw, and then we don't have enough defense. So what do we do here? Well, uh, we say in Galician, "Se non voy a vaca." I mean, we don't have a lot of options left, so we might as well go to the back rank. And yes, Rook F1 is one of the good moves here. If I'm not mistaken, Rook F4, Rook F3, Rook F2, Rook F1, all of them work. But obviously, we always want to go look, like as far as possible from the king. But our main idea, as pointed out by the arrow, and that's what Kling and Horwitz is we're gonna threaten the pawn from behind. Now, if white is to move here, white can do a couple things. White can play King D6 or King E6. Those are the things that should uh, be concerning for us, because pushing the pawn, not good, right? We already know that if white pushes the pawn, we're gonna start checking forever. No shelter for that king. There's no way that king goes in front of the pawn anymore, so we're gonna have checks forever. So this line is actually, I'm gonna delete it because it makes no sense. So King D6 and King E6 are interesting tries. So let's see one and then the other. Maybe let's see King D6. What white is trying to do is check, force our king out, and advance the pawn with check. That's the main threat. That's annoying. If white manages to do that, white will win, because then the pawn will get to e7 and there's no way to avoid promotion. So that's what we want to avoid. How do we do it? Well, there are two ways to draw this position. Now I'm confused because I'm not 100% sure that the other way is a way. Rook e1. Rook d1 check may or may not be a draw, but Rook e1 is for sure. Let me check with the database. Yeah, no. In this case, Rook d1 check is losing. So remember that position where Leeds suggested a check that was working in that specific situation? Here we don't have a long side to make it work. So in this case, only rook behind the pawn will make a draw. This check loses. Because again, the problem with this check is our king is gonna get forced out regardless of which side we choose now. Our king is gonna be forced out and we're gonna lose. So because here, even if we go to the short side, because the rook dominates this, we're not going to have a long side enough. It's not long enough to defend against this advance. So that's going to be a problem. So let me remove that line, if I find it. Yeah. All right. So the only defense here, and the key to remember is the kings are not opposed. Rook f7 loses, Cherry Novi. Rook f7 is similar to the rook d7 that John Jones suggested, where the opponent just trades rooks and secures the promotion of the pawn. So we don't want to do this. In general, we don't want to trade rooks. Very, like 9 times out of 10, trading rooks loses on the spot. So unless it's pretty clear that it's a draw, we don't go for a rook trade. So yeah, important to remember the kings are not opposed. So our opponent is not threatening checkmate, but our king is front of the pawn, and we don't have third rank defense. Because again, if here we had a move like rook a6 check, easy peasy, we would make a draw. So this technique we're seeing is just when everything else fails, we don't have third rank defense. We don't have first rank defense, so we do Kling and Horwitz, which is attacking the pawn from behind. So if you think about it, what we're going to see now would also work in those examples where we showed other techniques. Like when we saw third rank defense, in that example, we could have done this, Kling and Horwitz. The example where we saw the knight's pawn, yeah, a rook was behind. We could have done this. But those other techniques are simpler, so I prefer to do those and do this one only if necessary. But anyway, it's important to know this one as well. So the rook is behind the pawn. And the main idea is that the rook attacks the pawn, that's important, and it also helps controlling the pawn's advance or preventing it. So those are the two functions. That's why the rook is on that file. It's attacking the pawn that prevents this king from advancing, and at the same time it will prevent the pawn from advancing. So right now for white, well, white will never push the pawn because again we would start checking forever. So the way for white to make progress is to do this check. We're pushed out, and now there's no e6 check. See, the pawn can't push thanks to having the rook behind the pawn. Otherwise, white would push the pawn with a check and advance further. So we put the rook behind to prevent this to prevent this way to make progress for white. And now if white keeps checking, well, we keep repeating the position. And if white goes in front, like king e6, we're going to see this on the main line as well, by the way. So let's go back, because we repeated here with a check and 2. But here, let's go king e6, which would be the main line. So yeah, if, this check doesn't work because then you can't push the pawn, then what we can try is king e6. Now white is threatening checkmate, and we don't want to block that check with the rook. We don't want to do this check block with the rook, because the rook trade again wins. So we don't want to do that. Therefore, if we can't block that, delete line. No, that's not the line I want to delete. This is the one I want to delete. If we can't do that, Vov is suggesting king f8. We have to play king f8 or king d8. Now that you've been listening to me for a while, you all know which one I would like to play. Which one would you play, guys? King f8 or king d8? Vov says always short side, because yes, yes, very well. Very well, everybody. We always go for the short side. If we go to the long side, sometimes we draw, sometimes we lose. In this example, for example, I think we lose. But it doesn't matter. There's no need to remember when it does work, when it doesn't work, because it's always the short side. And if the game, if the end game was already lost, it would be lost on both sides. Okay, and if there's one chance to save the end game, it's going to be on the short side. Sometimes both sides work, but for every time that the long side works, the short side does, and not the other way. So always go to the short side. Yeah. So we go to the short side, exclamation mark. And yeah, now I have a line here with rook f7. I have another line with rook h8. Doesn't matter really. White can't make much progress. King g7, rook a8. And now, for example, this is interesting because white is trying to limit our king to keep pushing it further if we want to move it, but we can just wait. Okay, rook e2. We wait because the only way to make progress for white is going to be either give us checks when we can go back to the back rank, or move the king when we can go back here. Again, Kling and Horwitz, this is probably the geometrical thing to remember, although it's not very complicated. We have the rook behind the pawn, and we want to go with the king whenever possible to stop that pawn from advancing. It's basically when the opponent threatens to advance the pawn, we stop the pawn from advancing. It's not so complicated. But some people may get confused. Some people get confused sometimes, like, if the king moves out, then you check. Some people do this check, and then suddenly the king advanced, and now the pawn can advance next move. So don't do that. don't let your opponent make progress. Just keep the drawing technique. Just keep the drawing set up. King f7, and that pawn is not advancing. All right. So that's that. And then I have also this line rook f7 check, which is, I don't know, it's an attempt, I guess. Which side would you go here? King e8 or king g8? King e8 says Vov, but isn't king g8 the short side? Expecting. Yeah. Exceptions. Yeah. In truth, In truth, both are draw here, but I would go to e8. And but yeah, rook f7 is an interesting attempt because it challenges your concepts. So how well do we know our concepts? Indeed, we want the short side when we have to choose between long side and short side. But here we're not choosing that. We're choosing between remaining on the short side or being in front of the pawn. This is important. We want to be in front of the pawn. We said that at the beginning of the session. As a general rule, we want our king in front of the pawn or in the area to be able to stop the promotion attempts with our king, not just with a rook. Yeah. We walk in front, and that's best in general. Only when we're forced away from here and we have to choose short or long, we go short. But it would be dangerous. It's also a draw, but it would be dangerous to uh, leave our king cut, because at this point white is ready to make progress. White is defending the pawn, cutting our king, and white is so ready to start pushing the pawn. And white will get the pawn pushed. So white will do progress. It's still going to be a draw because thankfully we have the ability to do the long side defense that we know. But there's no reason to allow this. Again, it's a draw because we're going to have long side defense, which will prevent Lucena. Uh, but in my opinion, there's no reason to do it. Again, priorities, right? The same way as I would apply Philidor instead of Kling and Horwitz if I can, because it's simplest. I would say it's more important to have the king in front of the pawn than having it on the short side. King in front of the pawn, always best, unless we're pushed away. If we're pushed away, then we want the short side always. That's at least how I have these concepts in my mind. So yeah, sometimes I've analyzed end games with students, and I see some move like this, and I'm like, oof, and then they prove it's a draw, and I'm like, okay, yes, you're right, it was a draw, but there was no need to allow white to make progress, because white will get the pawn to the. I promise, I promise this pawn will get to e7. There's no way to prevent it now. So yeah, still a draw. You have long side defense, but there was no. You didn't need to allow that, right? So yeah, king e8. I think it's much simpler, even though of course these checkmate threats are always scary to deal with. But for example, now the rook goes to the other side. We still threatening checkmate, and we still want to choose the short side. We still want to go king f8 here. So no king d8. King d8 loses in this case. King f8. Yeah, exactly. Always short side when we have to move out of that e8 square. And I have a note here that says, and here, if black's rook was on any other file, white would win with king e7. Exactly, yeah, that's a good point. That's the other reason we want the rook behind the pawn, is to prevent king e7 here. If this rook was not behind the pawn, white would make progress with king e7. But now they can't. And if they try king d6, well, again, we block the advance of the pawn. And now, for example, rook a7 check. We repeat king e8, draw. No way to make progress. This is not a draw as simple as the ones we saw in other techniques. It's not, long side defense. It's a bit desperate, but when it works, it's very simple to implement. It's just check, check, check. Philidor is just wait until you can go back and do check, check, check. So the techniques we saw so far are simple. This one is not as simple, and they can move around. You have to choose where to put the king sometimes. So, sometimes you have to make some decisions, but if you have the concepts clear, we shouldn't be in danger. Um, but yeah, it's good again to be ready to use all the techniques necessary because our opponents can try us. Okay, and I think with this we saw all the all the techniques, all the defensive techniques. So we're gonna move on to the winning techniques, which are basically two. Oh, actually, I have two more chapters on Kling and Horwitz. I was hesitating whether doing this in one session or two. I may need a second session for this because I'm running out of time. PKR says AC or FH pawns is very complicated. Uh, no, it's not. I mean, it's tricky. So Rook and A and C pawns versus Rook, or Rook and F and H pawns versus Rook. That's a theoretical draw, and 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 it's well known that it's a theoretical draw in general, but in general means that there are positions where it's a draw and positions where it's not. So yeah, that could be an interesting one to bring someday because actually I've seen it in practical play and I've seen people misplay it. So I think it's probably a very nice one to bring one day. Yeah, it is complicated. It is the yeah, there are many chances to go wrong. I think if you ask me, it's a 50-50. Like in practical play, I think 50% of the times you're gonna see the side with the pawns winning. But it's a theoretical draw. Yeah. Okay. We have another Kling and Horwitz position. It's actually the same position, and we're gonna show a common mistake, which I think we already saw. So hopefully we're gonna go fast over this. So we go back, Rook F1, King D6. Oh yeah. And now, as we saw, the move, the drawing move is Rook E1. And the common mistake is to do the check. Now, sometimes this check works, as we saw in a previous example. In this case, it just loses on the spot. The king threatens checkmate. We go to the short side, and now I have notes here. How is this winning? How is this different from the position after king e6, king f8? Well, in that position, the rook was on f1, preventing the following maneuver. So let's see the maneuver. Rook f7 check, nice check. We go to e8 because we said so previously. In this case, if king g8, I have a note that rook d7 is annoying. And after rook e1, king f6, look at that. And the pawn advances because after the check we can go king e7 and the pawn keeps advancing. So I have some lines there. And if king e8, which is the normal move, then rook a7 winning a tempo again, but bringing the rook to the long side. So that was a nice maneuver because now when we go back to f8, check here, king e7, again winning because the rook is not attacking the pawn. Otherwise, if the rook was on e1, king e7 would not be possible. And black is lost because the rook occupied the important a file. We already talked about this. In this desperate situation where our king is pushed away from the front of the pawn, we want the rook ready to do the long side defense. We want the rook on the a file, and white just prevented that with this maneuver. So yeah, this is an instructive chapter on that topic. Wolf says, by the way, I once played the defending side in a bishop versus wrong rook pawn ending when my attacking opponent didn't know. I said, well, now it's wrong, and he was surprised and said, no, I will continue playing. Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, I've seen all sorts of things. Oh, that reminds me of it's completely unrelated actually, but it has to do with bishop versus rook. Um, let me bring an analysis board. This composition. Yeah. Oh, wrong rook pawn. Oh. Okay. I thought you said rook. Sorry. Oh yeah. I get it. I get it. Yeah. Never mind. Yeah, that's common. At the beginning of this session, I was talking about these situations that I find really funny when you see two people playing an endgame, and one of them, you can tell one of them knows something that the other doesn't. Like that. That's a perfect example. So you, you know about the wrong corner, the wrong color, and your opponent doesn't, so you force the draw, and your opponent didn't even realize you just forced the draw. And it's so funny to watch. They keep playing until they realize. um, that's one of the reasons why we study endgames. Yeah. Okay. So never mind about the one that I was gonna show. It's completely unrelated. um, okay, then I have a chapter which is the last one on the topic of defensive ideas, um, which is this one, a recoverable mistake. So we're gonna see again this same line. We go rook f1, and after king d6 we go behind the pawn. At this point we all know how to do Kling and Horwitz. Now this is automatic. We go rook e1. Nice. And after king e6 we go king f8, right? But king d8 in this case still draws. In this particular case it's still a draw. So I have the line here just to show it how to make a draw. But honestly, I may even delete this chapter because we should never do this. We should never do this. Now, sometimes it's useful, uh, when you achieve a certain level. Like I don't know which level is that. Maybe it's 2000, maybe it's 2300, maybe it's grandmaster level. But at some point you may want to study even the things you don't want to study at lower level. So at some point you may want to study these because sometimes for whatever came in the previous moves you will have your king on d8, unfortunately, instead of f8. So maybe it's important to know to tilt the opponent. No, I mean, sometimes you couldn't avoid. Let's say you just captured something on the eight. I don't know. Sometimes you come from a position where you find yourself in this position instead of with the king on f8. So yeah, it could be relevant. It could be relevant to know. Uh, but I'm gonna go super quick about it right now. Um, Here, king d7. It's Kling and Horwitz, so that's not relevant. But okay, now I'm gonna do the same mistake again, and now we're gonna do a different try. Is rook e8, which is a very tricky move. It's intending to do um, king f7. The threat is king f7, and if king d7, there's e6 check. And for example, but can't we not check then? Okay, let's put this and this, right? And if king d7 e6 wins, and if we do check, king e7, and the pawn advances. So rook e8 is a nice way to get the pawn marching. And it's an interesting trick to know. As we will see, it's still a draw. But this is one of the very few scenarios, and it's only because I mean, we went to the long side, but there are two reasons why this is going to be a draw, and we need both. One is the short side that we're going to use, and by the way, we do rook h1 here. Only way to draw is we're going to do a short side defense, which is lateral checks. Usually this side will be too short for that, but there are two things why we're gonna do a draw. First one is it's not as short as it could be. Like if this was a bishop's pawn, it's gone. So let's say it's a central pawn. That's important. So we have at least two files, which would usually not be enough, but in this case it's enough because we have the second thing, which is the rook is on e8. So we're gonna be able to attack the rook. Um, with the rook anywhere else, short side defense doesn't work. But the rook is there because that's the only way for white to try to make progress with the pawn. So if white goes for this, we go for short side defense. If white doesn't go for this, then we're fine. So, um, but yeah, let's see how it works. King f7, we check. King g6, and now just in time we have king d7. Otherwise, yeah. So this is a very particular case, and again, we got here because we did a wrong move. We went to the long side, but sometimes you find yourself in the long side. So also, I think this chapter is important for reference to have it here, and to know that sometimes short side defense works, but very particular scenario. And after rook a8, we go back, and we're ready to set up another Kling and Horwitz. All right. I have a lot of chapters to go on, and I also wanted to add even more. So I probably should do a second. Oh, thanks, Bob. Okay. Maybe let's just show the attacking techniques. So at least we cover all the defensive techniques, which we already did. Philidor third rank, we did first rank, we did long side, even short side here, and Kling and Horwitz. So we have all the defensive techniques, and we're gonna very fast, because it's very simple concept, go over the attacking technique Lucena, that, or also called the bridge, that probably you already know because it's common knowledge, but we're gonna go over it. And then we're going to leave the practical cases for the next session that we can do next week. 6072 FIDE and 2050 Lichess Blitz. Learning a lot. Nice. Okay, so let's briefly go over Lucena, which is a technique that we use to win in a situation like this, where, sorry, the defending king is cut away from the pawn, so it can't get in front of the pawn, and we got to the pawn to the 7th rank. Now, another important feature of this position is, even though the defending side is doing everything they can to keep our king blocking the pawn, like, you know, this king is preventing our king from going to the right, the rook is preventing the king from going to the left. Hello, Super Mario. That's not the right defensive setup, because the rook is on the short side. As we know, for black to have hopes to defend against Lucena, they should have the rook on the long side. This king should be here, this rook should be here, if that makes any sense. Or even here, right, directly on the long side to perform the checks. But the defending king is on the long side and the rook on the short side. That's wrong. And therefore, we're ready to perform this maneuver called the bridge, or also Lucena. Now, the first step is important. The first step is to push this king away from the pawn. So we do this check. Because otherwise we can never get the king out, really. So we need to check. The king needs to go to the G file. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to try to go to the E file. And after king e8, I think black just resigns. So yeah, so definitely the king has to go to the g file. And now what black wants to do is, if the king tries to get out from in front of the pawn, black is going to start checking us forever. That's the idea. But before we get out, and while this king is still cat, we're going to bring a rook to a much better square to get ready for this breach that I'm sure you already know this. Rook f4 on the fourth rank. And now the arrows are self-explanatory. They speak for themselves. So that king is going to go zigzag to d5, and we're going to use a rook to block uh, any check. I mean, the last check at least. And no way to prevent promotion. So king out, check, check, check. But one question. Okay, Voft is gonna ask one question. So I'm gonna go back to this position. Cozy Zaki Marcina, welcome. Thanks for the follow. I'm gonna go to this position because I have a feeling the question is about this. Maybe. Question. Yeah, I knew you were gonna ask that. Um, Posture check. Thank you. So yeah, the king went to g7. What happens if we go king g6 to try and attack the rook once the rook goes rook f4? Because we're gonna go rook f4, right? That's our plan. And now, what happens if black, instead of just waiting, goes after a rook? That's a very, very good question. Um, Super Mario suggests rook f8. I think rook f8 wins. Um, there are many moves that win. Actually, there's another plan, by the way, that always works. People don't tell this, never ever, but couldn't we just say the rook, sack the rook? Oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. But yeah, I think the next chapter is probably about that. But okay, let me talk about a couple things here. Uh, First, one plan that always works in positions where Lucena works is this. People usually don't talk about this, and also that. But that's not very relevant because rook f8 in this case, I think it's pretty good. Um, the point is, now we're gonna get out. Like, this rook can't prevent us from getting out from one of the sides, and this king is too far from our rook. So let's say once we get out, we go to the right side of the pawn to start doing a zigzag against the rook. We can't do it here because we can't. But on this side of the pawn we can do this zigzag, and the rook on f8 is already securing the promotion, so we don't need the king to defend the pawn. Yeah, so this would be an easy way to win. The other thing I wanted to say is about the rook sack. Uh, if you do this with the point that, oh, if they take, I get a queen, or if they do the checks, I still have Lucena. Well, first of all, here this, so this is a draw, but so yeah, so after this check, I think you have to go. You have to accept the draw in this position, right? So king e7 was already a bad move. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you still win here, but you have to go for queen versus rook, which again, um, I would allow. I would avoid it. So my point. Actually, funny story. This happened. I was playing in a tournament over the board. It was 15 minutes plus zero, no increment, just 15 minutes game. I was playing against this guy. This guy was at the time we were more or less the same rating. So imagine 2000 something. I think he was like 2020 something, and I was like 2050 something. Two 2000s playing. a 15 plus zero game over the board. I was black, and we arrived to an end game where we were both in time travel, and my opponent had Lucena. My opponent had, you can imagine, he had like this position. And the thing is, instead of rook f4, I mean, my king never got to g6, it got to g7. But my opponent, instead of going for rook f4, he went for rook f5, which is. So in the end, we got to a position where um, I attacked his rook, and he sacrificed the rook to get a queen, and we got to a queen versus rook endgame. Now, in my opinion, queen versus rook endgame, uh, between humans, is a win for the queen. I know theoretically it's a win, and I know a human versus a computer will never win. So it's a very complicated endgame. But between humans, it's always a win. Like, in practical play, it's very hard to defend with the rook. However, I managed to defend, it was time travel. So I managed to defend enough. So my opponent, in order to not lose on time, sacrificed the queen for the rook, and I made a draw. But yeah. To make curses like this more often, regularly. I do once a week. Last week we did rook versus pawn. Next week, I think we will do part two of this one, and yeah, one endgame session per week. Hey Karmar. Um, all right, so we already saw Lucena, and yeah, very good question about yeah, I do it on Tuesdays. I do it on Tuesdays. I also publish them on YouTube later, so you can check all the material. But yeah, it's better when you're, if you can come live and interact, it's always better. Also, if you have any topics that you would like to see, as long as they're end games, yeah. And oh, this is the alternative method. I actually have a chapter for that. The alternative method I showed, yeah, where the point is to zigzag. Uh, when you can get away with the king, as long as the rook is defending the promotion square, you can start zigzagging. So that's an alternative method to Lucena, which is maybe relevant to know. And it works again. It works as long as the pawn is central or a bishop's pawn. So you have two files to one side of the pawn, to the side you need. Um, yeah, and on the next week, we're gonna go over um, this very important endgame, uh, which, this position. It may look simple, but it's not. We're gonna see a lot of ideas from this position. We're gonna see tricks. We're even going to see none other than Magnus Carlsen messing this one up and losing a drone position. So yeah, we're gonna spend some time here on this one, and all the techniques we've seen, maybe not all of them, but first rank defense not, but most of the techniques we've seen are gonna be applied, and yeah, very very relevant. And also, I'm gonna add, because I see they're not in the study, I'm gonna add a few more examples that I think are good practice for this topic. So yeah, next week we're gonna do part 2 of this, um, and I have to go right now. But yeah, see you next week. I'll be here tomorrow also streaming as usual. But yeah, for endgames, this is gonna be all for this week. Thank you guys for being there. It was nice, good stuff, and I hope we're all learning a lot. Um, this endgame is incredibly important. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'll be streaming back tomorrow, and tomorrow is going to be my last stream of the week because I have a weekend trip. What time next week? I start every day at 1:30 p.m. CDT. I don't know what's your time zone, Sponge like Canon, but yeah, I start at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, which is like exactly 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, yeah. I see Old Has Been streaming, which I've never seen before. So I think I'm gonna rate him. Very good Crazy House player, probably. Um, showing some Crazy House. GMT for you. Oh, then it's 7 hours difference. I think. Then it should be 8:30 p.m. for you. But yeah, just count. It's 2 hours ago. This stream lasted exactly 2 hours, so 2 hours ago and 10 minutes. Easy to figure out. Okay, guys, I'll see you tomorrow then. Be good. Have a nice rest of your day. Study a lot of endgames and practice them. Rawr. Bye.